Thank you for listening to Soho Bites, the only podcast in the world, as far as we're aware, dedicated to talking about films set in Soho, the beating heart of bohemian cosmopolitan London. If you would like to support the show, you can do this in the form of a star rating or review at sohobitespodcast.com/review, or if you'd like to put a small amount of money where your mouth is, you can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Donations can be from as little as £3, which will buy, at London prices, about half a drink for one of our thirsty guests. You may hear some different URLs in the upcoming episode, but by far the easiest way is to follow one of those links. They are again sohobitespodcast.com/review and sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Thank you for your continued support and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to episode 28 of Soho Bites. Soho Bites is the podcast in which we talk to people who love Soho and people who love film. My name is Dominic DeLargy, and I know you've all been waiting with breathless anticipation for that huge announcement. Who has won the prize from last month's competition? Remember, all you had to do was go to ratethispodcast.com/Soho Bites and leave a review to be entered into the draw to win a DVD copy of last month's film. That was 1937's Saturday Night Review. Well, I have the names in a hat in front of me. It's actually a mug. And without further ado, the winner is Match Me Sydney. That's Match Me Sydney, all one word. Congratulations to you, Match Me Sydney, or Match Me, or Sydney. So if you DM me on Twitter, that's at BitesSoho, or email me at sohobitespodcast@gmail.com with your actual name and postal address, I'll pop it in the post. And jolly well done to you. Now, researching this episode has led me down a long and winding path of discovery into the lives of two people about whom I didn't previously know much about. In fact, in the case of one of them, I hadn't even heard of him. A bit later, I'll be meeting up with Anna Cale. Anna is the writer of a new biography of Diana Dors, an actress whose larger-than-life public image was matched only by her larger-than-life life. It will be easy, I thought, to tie this in with one of the many Soho films in which Diana must have appeared, but I soon realised that, surprisingly, she did hardly any Soho films at all. She often played bad girls from the wrong side of the tracks, good time girls and working girls, but very rarely were these films set in Soho. In the end, we opted for Value for Money from 1955, starring Diana Dors and John Gregson, which is a very unusual Soho film in that it's mostly set in Yorkshire. Bayek! Hear my conversation with Anna and my weak justification for classifying Value for Money as a Soho film in the second half of the show. And it was whilst reading Anna's book about Diana that I came across a few mentions of one of her early boyfriends, one who became a lifelong friend of hers, a fellow called Michael Cabourn-Waterfield. I confess I hadn't heard of Michael Cabourn-Waterfield, but older listeners may have done, as he regularly featured in gossip columns in the 60s and 70s and was known, partly thanks to Diana Dors, as Dandy Kim. He died in 2016 at the age of 86 and is most well known today for founding the Ann Summers chain of sex shops. In fact, in Wikipedia, that's the only thing it says about him. But there was so much more to his extremely eventful life than that. I managed to track down Dandy Kim's friend and biographer, Nigel Hamilton-Walker, and persuaded him to come on the show. And we'll be hearing from him about his friend's totally bonkers life in just a few moments.
Dandy, Dandy, where you gonna go now? Who you gonna run to? All your little life, you're chasing all the girls. They can't resist your smile. They long for...
Attempting to squeeze the life of Michael Cabourn-Waterfield / Dandy Kim into a short item on a podcast is an impossible task. This was a man who lived a long, extraordinary life, rubbing shoulders with some of the most famous and notorious people of the 20th century. He was from a fairly prosperous background and was expelled from his private school, Cranleigh, in 1946, and was described by the then headmaster, the Reverend David Loveday, as a sinister and untrustworthy child. Not the language you'd expect to hear from a man of the cloth. Kim went on to become a kind of modern-day Harry Flashman, finding himself at the centre of many of the most significant events of the 20th century. His adventures brought him into contact with, and not always in the good books of, royalty, Hollywood studio bosses, gangsters, fraudsters, a certain well-known society osteopath, dictators, heiresses and film stars, all of which made him fair fodder for the gossip columnists on both sides of the Atlantic. If you Google Michael Cabourn Waterfield, you'll read mainly about him starting Ann Summers, which he founded in 1970. But he'd achieved notoriety well before that. To find out more about his earlier schemes, I would urge you to read the biography of Dandy Kim, written by my guest, Nigel Hamilton-Walker, link in the show notes at sohobitespodcast.com. There are many adventures featured in the book that we were unable to talk about in the programme because this podcast is not 3 days long. These include, for example, Kim's inadvertent role in the rise of Fulgencio Batista to power in pre-revolutionary Cuba, and his uncomfortable association with the American mobster Meyer Lansky. There's the story of a robbery at the holiday home of movie mogul Sam Warner on the French Riviera, which resulted in Kim being handed a jail sentence which was then mysteriously cut short, perhaps because of the explosive contents of a dossier that was stolen pertaining to the British monarchy. He once found himself negotiating with Imelda Marcos about bringing to Filipino TV screens the Miss Topless Universe competition, a scheme that Kim had cooked up with Lord Lichfield. Spoiler alert, it never got off the ground. In fact, there were many business schemes along the way that spectacularly failed, but some that made him a lot of money, all of which got spent. Oh, and there were many, many women. Oh, and just to be clear, when I say there were many, many women, what I mean by that is that he had sexual intercourse with many men. You get the picture.
Oh, dandy, dandy, when you gonna...
My guest, Nigel Hamilton-Walker, first met Kim in 1965, and they later became close friends, and they remained so until Kim's death in 2016. We spoke online, and I began by asking Nigel when and how Dandy Kim had launched himself onto an unsuspecting London.
Yeah, it's around the late 40s, early 50s, Dom. He had a thing for horse riding, he had a thing for sex. School wasn't very good for him. He'd lost his father, and he'd been sent down to Cranleigh, very, very strict rules, etc., etc. Unhappy there, caused chaos there, was always in trouble. And he saved enough money up to get a train to London. Came up, lost his virginity. He must have been about 14, 15. Loved the idea of London, but his main other interest was horses. Around Hyde Park Corner, there used to be Grosvenor Mews, full of all the original stables, which all the classic car dealers took over back in the sort of 60s and 70s. There was a woman who ran the stables there, who almost sort of looked after him. So he was trying to spend as much time as he could, trying to enjoy the finer things of life, even then. And he met, by total chance, Anthony Newley. And they were both like 15 years of age. And they set a friendship up. They kept drinking together. And they were very, very different backgrounds, because Newley was very much the Cockney East End boy. And he was very much the world-travelled, suave, sophisticated, old Etonian voice. But they became great, great friends. That's really what started his first business with the post-war premium nylon stockings, because he met a guy called Bobby McHugh with Newley in the Astor Club one night, all of about 16, 17 years of age. And that's really what started. It's applicable to you, because his main income then was literally walking around Soho and Theatreland at night, flogging off these premium stockings which you couldn't buy after post-war rationing. And again, through that, he met Billy Hill, who ran that business. He was starting out as well, albeit a lot older than Kim. And that's how, with Newley, he met Diana Dors, because Newley was going to the pub, asked him to go for a drink on New Year's Eve. Diana Dors was there. That's how those two got together originally.
So the thing with Billy Hill who was a notorious gangster. I mean, the king of Soho at that stage. Was he not stepping on Billy Hill's toes with this business of flogging nylons?
No, because Bobby McHugh worked for Billy Hill. Those were really his runners around the town. So he certainly wasn't stepping on his toes because the stock was actually coming from Billy Hill via Bobby McHugh. So all he had to do was go out and sell it, take a cut for himself and return the money. They were getting a living out of that.
And where did he live at this time, Kim?
He was living in Maida Vale from memory for a while. When he moved in with Dors, they took a flat near the Albany in St James's. There was always a shortage of money because if you gave them any of that mob, in our terms today, $1,000, they'd go and spend $2. They were crazy. He was really not doing that well. He was very, very much the young errand boy. Diana Dors had got all sorts of wonderful contracts, starting with Rank and God knows what else. There's this, Britain's answer to almost Brigitte Bardot and Marilyn Monroe. And he was a bit out of his depth, I think, to start with there. And then a guy called Hamilton, strangely, same name as mine, came along, made a great big play for him. He was a horrible man. He used to beat her up, heavy drinking sessions, all the rest of it. But again, though, Kim stayed, they became more soulmates. They discussed anything together.
So the stockings business, that was just the first of his hundreds of business ventures that he had throughout his life.
Yes.
Some of them were more legitimate than others.
Yes.
And he's most well known for setting up Ann Summers, which we'll get onto. But he did, before that, he published a sex manual, which must have been one of the very first sex manuals.
He wasn't only the first, it was really what turned him on to create Ann Summers, because he couldn't believe his own success. Because he had this criminal record, which he hadn't. Everybody in that era, we're going back many years ago, knew about the robbery on the Riviera. You could still find out about it today if you dig hard enough. And basically, he wrote it under the name of Terence Hendrickson, so no one would know it was him. Spoke to a few publishers, and he got nowhere. So he started mail order. Well, he'd only printed about 200 or 300 copies. And it was all done, do you know London very well? Do you know Glebe Places, where all the studios are?
Yeah.
Off Roland Gardens, yeah. He'd got a flat there, and he was doing it out of there, just mail order. And the checks, it was a joke. The checks were just coming in through the letterbox and on the hall floor for however much the book was. And he was just printing every week. He picked up, genuinely, in those days, think of it in today's money, £250,000. It was, I have seen it. It was the crudest looking book and cover you've ever seen.
I've seen it's available to buy on eBay still.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, after that, he was a firm believer in mail order, hence the Ann Summers situation.
Okay, so let's move on to Ann Summers, because Ann Summers, I think most people know that Ann Summers wasn't the person who set up the shop, and that was a kind of a made-up name, but it wasn't actually a made-up name.
No, it wasn't.
It was, but she was somebody who worked for the company.
Her real name was Anise.
Anise Summers.
Yes, and she worked down in Kent. She was a marriage destroyer, really. She took a job with my father. And my father had opened some garages down in Kent. They ended up having a big affair. It cost my parents' marriage, to tell you the truth. She really wanted to get into the centre of London and what have you. She was definitely having a few affairs at the same time. And she rented a farm near Plaxtor, which is a tiny little village down in Kent. 3 fellas found out they were all paying the rent for the same property. She'd see one on Monday, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, but one of them was Kim. Kim then took her on full time and started the company, designed the Apple brand, which is the same sign that Apple today use. The Apple, Eve's Apple with a bit bitten out of it.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what to call it, and he didn't want his name on it. Or again, he didn't want his name on anything because of the past, really.
He was already notorious, wasn't he, by this stage? In some some
around
circles.
London especially. So he took a house, again, same as the Hendrickson book. He went to Germany, he went to Thailand, he got manufacturing underway, he stole the designs, frankly, from that old lady who was a sex therapist, if you like, and she did it under sexual remedies, but in fact they were sex toys. He copied her stock, had it made in Far East, brought it back here. It was all sent to a house on Putney Hill. And he didn't like the name of niece, so he called it Anne Summers. It's as simple as that. They did it together. My ex-wife, funnily enough, worked for him for a while there as well. So he had the two girls up there, him up there overseeing it, going to the bank each day in the rolls. And they were doing great, great business. It was working in every sense of the word until he decided he wanted to create a London shop and a showroom. He was tempting fate, really. They did a whole thing. The television companies were there and all the rest of it. And the shop duly opened. In fact, I think again in the book, you've seen pictures of the shop opening.
Yeah.
Obviously, the overheads ran up. It was very different to mail order. The overheads were running up. And she was getting ideas, visions of grandeur. And I remember all this, actually, because it's years now, about 1970. She was made an approach by the News of the World to tell the story. And she had to play to it. And the story was well and truly exaggerated. The figures were exaggerated. It was made out to be totally sexual. She was enjoying being on the middle pages of the newspaper and what have you. And it was her claim to fame. Well, of course, on the Monday morning, I don't know I think it was called the Vice Squad in those days. They raided. The bank obviously foreclosed immediately. It was all over the paper, and in fact, it was Dandy Kim behind it. Well, that caused another load of problems, and it went into receivership, and it was bought by the Gold Brothers.
How much did they pay for it? Was it a tenner or something?
Tenner.
Amazing.
So they ended up giving him, it was either 10 grand or £1,000 after months of plaguing him to, where do you get this made? Because they had no knowledge of this business at all. Obviously, the shop had closed down, so they decided they were going to go back to the brass roots of it with mail order and what have you. And they used to phone him, and he said, I'm not giving you any more information. I've lost my business, thank you. Obviously, he never spoke to Anise again. He hated her after this. Right. She ruined it, all for 15 grand. So that was the end of that. He then took a fee to come and consult. Well, they argued the whole time, and there was a big fallout, and he walked away. And he still believed he was owed money. And he was always bitter about the Anne Summers story because it's publicised. Jackie Gold's now got a company worth £750 million when it's totally his concept. And there was he in a retirement home on the King's Road on a pension with nothing. And it festered. It definitely. I used to sometimes say to him, okay, not again. I can't listen to it again. He was bitter about it. Understandably, I suppose.
And the legal battles went on for decades, almost at the end of his life, didn't they?
I think it finally killed him off, to be honest with you, because he litigated himself in the High Courts of Justice. Because all three of them, the two brothers and the sister, all three wrote their biographies, all of which his name came up in. So He sued. One book called him a liar, one book called him a robber. Another one went on about this nonsense about landing a helicopter in Hyde Park for Princess Margaret. He really thought he was going to go and have a swan song and get £500,000, £1 million out of it. I think the truth be known, I didn't put it in the book. I see it was somewhere, some that remains unknown, between 5 and 80 grand. Dom, at the end of the day, I put it nearer the 5 grand. It was all a bit sad.
Right. Because he was a millionaire several times, wasn't he? And then bankrupt. Yeah. I mean, was he officially bankrupt, or was he just on his uppers and he'd try and find some new schemes?
I don't think he ever officially went. I know a few companies went. I don't think he ever personally went bankrupt. No, I don't.
Okay. And he ended his days, like you say, in was it officially a retirement home or just a nice little flat he had in Chelsea?
It was just a nice little flat. I mean, he had an old girlfriend who'd married a guy in New York, and they had a place in Chelsea Harbour. So he lived there for a while. The husband found out in New York that the wife had lent him his flat. Well, that went down like a lead balloon. So the Kensington and Chelsea had to go and sort something out for him. So he ended up Astor Court up in the King's Road. And there's a little bar over the road there, Antico or whatever, which you'd see him just sitting there when he got smaller and smaller as he got older, just drinking by himself. He was quite sad, really. I mean, he's still full of ideas. Even that picture you probably saw with golden balls, with the Beckham thing. I mean,
he must have been, 80 when he had this idea?
Yes.
So could you explain what this was? Because this is a bizarre thing that he actually went through with it, didn't he, in the end?
Well, 2 people backed it. He asked me to back it. I wouldn't back it. The idea was that the Da Vinci drawings were going to be replaced with Beckham's head, and the balls were going to be gold-leafed. And every print he had wasn't good enough, because he was a perfectionist as well. It had to be right, or he didn't want it. Fair money went into this. I mean, like 50, 60 grand just for a poster, which was ridiculous. He even got 2 trips to Japan out of it to try and market it.
There's a limited edition poster that had real gold leaf on the enlarged testes of...
Yeah, you got it.
Of
yes.
David Beckham, who was superimposed onto the famous Leonardo da Vinci legs and arms outsplayed picture. It's the weirdest concept I've ever come across, but it sounded like he made some money out of it.
No, that wasn't a winner.
Oh, okay.
No, that wasn't a winner either.
That's one of the ones that didn't work.
I think there were about 100 of them in a cardboard box sitting in at the court, yeah. No.
Right, I'm going to see if I can pick one up.
No, that didn't work.
Thank you, Nigel, for giving up your time to come on the show. I can't stress enough how much stuff about Kim's life we were unable to talk about. But Nigel's biography of Dandy Kim is available to read online, and you'll find a link to it on the show notes. That's at sohobitespodcast.com. Hello, this is what's known as a mid-roll ad. It's one of those annoying interruptions that's inserted retrospectively at just the wrong point. And the reason for it is that Soho Bites takes up hours of time every month, and I'm hoping you might be able to support the show. There are 2 ways you can do this. One is for free, and it's to leave the show a star rating or kind review. You can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/review. Or if you'd like to assist financially to help cover our costs, you can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Thank you very much. Apologies for the interruption, and back to the episode. As I mentioned earlier, 1955's Value for Money is an unusual, if not unique, Soho film, in that it's mostly set nowhere near Soho. The majority of the film is actually set in Yorkshire, in a fictional town called Barfield, with the non-fictional town of Batley acting as a body double for the exterior location scenes. So, you ask, why is it a Soho film? Well, I admit it is tenuous, but it does just about qualify because our 2 lead characters, Ruthine, played by Diana Dors, and Chailey, played by John Gregson, meet in Soho. They actually meet at a West End theatre that's loosely based on the Windmill, while Chailey's down there in that there London on a lad's weekend.
A football trip, cup final in London.
Aye, and it's real value for money. Coach trip down, dinner at one of them slap-up hotels, and after the match, one of them reviews.
Broaden your mind.
There's a ticket going to begin for cash.
Yeah.
How much?
£5.
£5? You must think I'm made of money.
It's a real education. All them chorus girls in their scanties.
Not to mention them fan dancers.
The premise of Value for Money is similar to that of Rattle of a Simple Man, a film we talked about back in episode 5. A naive, simplistic man from up north becomes captivated by a glamorous London showgirl. The 2 key differences are that in Rattle of a Simple Man, pretty much all of the action does in fact take place in London rather than back up north. And in Value for Money, our naive northern protagonist, Chailey, unlike Percy in Rattle of a Simple Man, is secretly very, very rich. I'm going to leave most of the plot synopsis to my guest, Anna, but this clip, in which Chailey takes Ruthine to a fancy London restaurant after meeting her at the theatre, illustrates the gulf between their 2 worlds.
What shall we have, Chailey?
There's nothing I can read here except the prices.
Well, how about a little smoked salmon to start with?
All right, thick or clear?
Oh, no, don't have soup. The salmon's out of this world here.
So are the prices.
Then after that, I think we'll have some cutlet d'agneau.
What's that?
Well, cutlets, and agneau is lamb.
Why the heck can't they say lamb chops and be done with it, eh?
Côtelette d'agneau, pomme pie, petit pois, pain d'asperge, no sweet of course.
Of course.
What, no afters?
A little camembert for monsieur.
A camembert?
May I suggest a little brie?
Aye, some of that.
Value for Money is a good-natured comedy which plays on various stereotypes. The frugal Yorkshireman, the gold-digging showgirl, the no-nonsense battle-axe women of Barfield, the loose, slightly untrustworthy foreign waiter, they're all in there, but it never feels malicious. The fact that up until 10 years ago there was a pub in Batley called the Barfield Arms, named in honour of the fictional town in the film, shows there were no hard feelings. There are a few well-known actors who surprisingly pop up in the film playing smallish parts. Donald Pleasance plays Limpy, a long-serving member of Chailey's staff at his Shoddy and Mungo factory in Barfield. I didn't know what Shoddy and Mungo was either, but I do now. Details in the show notes if you want to find out. Molly Weir, she of Rent-A-Ghost and Something in the City, plays a perky young waitress. Joan Hickson, that's Miss Marple to you and me, has a turn as Chailey's no-nonsense housekeeper. And IMDb assures me that Leslie Ding Dong Phillips is in it too. But I've watched it 3 times now and haven't spotted him yet. John Gregson was fairly well known at this time but became very famous a few years later, playing Commander Gideon in the ITV series Gideon's Way. And that name Chailey isn't, as you might think, some peculiar traditional Yorkshire name, as he explains to Ruthine on their first date.
It was very sweet of you to ask me here, Chailey. What a funny name.
Oh, I was trying to tell you. I'm a mistake. Well, the registrar was a southerner. When he asked me Christian name, my dad said, make it Chailey.
You mean Charlie?
That's right, Chailey. Londoners never could understand plain English.
We have the perfect guest in the perfect location to talk about value for money. Anna Cale, whose new biography of Diana Dors has just been published, and she actually does live in that strange and distant place called Yorkshire. I was delighted to find out that they have the internet up there, so we were able to get together online a couple of weeks ago to talk about Diana Dors and value for money. Thank you for coming on the show. I've asked you to come on because you've just written a new biography of Diana Dors, which is called...
It's called The Real Diana Dors. Available from all good bookshops and some dodgy ones as well. So yeah, it's out there in the wild. I wrote it last year in lockdown. So yeah, it's amazing that it's finally out and I can talk about it and share it with people.
How long did it take to write?
Oh, goodness. So including research and reading and that phase of it, it was about a year, I would say. So I started the prep for it in the end of 2019. And just as lockdown happened, I was just about to start doing some research visits and bits and pieces to kind of bolster that side of it. And they all had to be abandoned. But I am eternally grateful to, for example, the National Library of Australia, whose entire collection is online. And I was able to access all sorts of bits of information because they're a big fan of her in Australia. So there was lots of stuff, particularly from the 50s. So yeah, it was kind of finding alternative sources and ways of concluding that research was challenging.
And how long have you been thinking about writing about Diana Dors?
I've only been writing properly for a couple of years. I came late to having the confidence to put myself out there as a writer about film. And I wasn't planning to write a book so quickly, but it just kind of the opportunity came up and I had to grab it. So Diana Dors is someone who I've loved as an actor and discovered through the years. I have quite an interest in kind of mid-20th century British film. So obviously she features largely in that period in British cinema. And I absolutely loved writing the book. She's such a great person to read about and to write about, a fascinating person with a great story. And it's been wonderful to kind of try and capture that and bring that to people's attention.
So we're talking about value for money, which is... It's kind of a Soho film. It's tenuously a Soho film, and there are one or two scenes quite close to Soho. I think you can argue that the theatre that Diana is appearing in, or Ruthine is appearing in, is the Windmill. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it must be. I can't think of what else it would be. I think it is. Yeah.
And one of the stock Yorkshireman characters says, "We'll see all lasses in scanties," which made me think that's probably the Windmill. But it's mostly set in Yorkshire, or it's mostly set in Yorkshire. And as I talk to you now, you're not far from Barfield/Batley.
I'm not, no. And I have quite a personal connection to Batley. My husband's from Batley. So when we met, that's where he was living. So I know Batley very well. As you say, it stood in for Barfield. But Barfield absolutely is Batley. It's anyone who knows that town will know it represents the town and its spirit very well, from obviously the way they use the the centre of the town and the buildings, and the capturing that spirit of those small civic centres that you get in Yorkshire towns around here. Shoddy and Mungo is a big thing in that area, and Batley is very proud of its history in the cloth trade. Batley really embraced standing in for Barfield when the film was made. The location shooting around the town, everyone came out to see Diana Dors, and obviously to see her, and the scenes where there are crowds of people when she arrives in the town, that actually was the case when she was in the town. The real people kind of coming to see this beautiful film star come into their town to film.
Because the first time she made a film in Yorkshire was a few years before, and she wouldn't have been as major a star in those days, would she?
No, she filmed A Boy, a Girl and a Bike in the Yorkshire Dales. She loved making that film. It was her first location shoot, quite like as you say, early on in her career. She was a young star playing the kind of the not quite the lead. She was kind of fourth or fifth or sixth on the bill, and she kind of gave her usual turn as the cheeky young thing out to cause trouble. But yeah, A Boy, a Girl and a Bike was her first experience of Yorkshire, and very a great experience for her, I think, as an actor.
I really like Boy and a Girl and a Bike. I reviewed it on the Talking Pictures TV podcast. I think it was episode 1 actually. Yeah, I really like it. It's a lovely film, and I think she's really good in it.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah.
I also really like her in Oliver Twist.
Yes.
You can see little hints of the naughty persona thing that she developed. Anyway, give me a quick summary of the plot of Value for Money.
Pretty easy, I think. It's pretty straightforward. So Cheney Broadbent is somehow finding himself inheriting his dad's shoddy business when his father dies, and he inherits his fortune of £62,000 or whatever it was, and his business. And Chaley is seemingly a young man, although he looks about 53 in the film. John Gregson's not very youthful. He always seemed to be the same age in every film to me. So John Gregson plays Chaley, who is a typical Yorkshireman, let's say, or the typical stereotype of a Yorkshireman, who is very frugal with his money, doesn't want to spend any money, doesn't want to do anything risky. He's not a risk taker. His girlfriend, Ethel, his long-suffering girlfriend, wants him to maybe kind of take a few more risks. He's not a catch, if you ask me.
Absolutely not a catch. Oh, my word. Ethel is a woman with no self-pride at all.
She's a terrible character. I shouted at the screen a few times watching Ethel. She made it all the way to the Yorkshire Post as a reporter. She should have stayed in Leeds. Yeah. But yet she comes back to Barfield, to the local paper, just to capture the heart of Chaley, who honestly is not worth it, mate.
And not for his money either. I mean, that would be the main. No. That would be worth it if it was for the money, because 62 grand is a good few million now.
Yeah,
she could have lived in Upper Barfield.
Yeah, could have bought Barfield. He's not a catch, but either is she. To be honest, she's pretty weedy as a character. I don't like her very much, to be honest, and no. I think she should just get a grip. But he decides to go to London on a football supporters coach trip. I don't quite know what team it would be, but yeah, all the men of the town are going down to London on a coach, which is very familiar to people up here. That's what you do. You go down to London for supper and a show, or for football or whatever on a coach. That's what a lot of people did at the time, still do, I think. Make a kind of real weekend of it. And yeah, he's invited down. He eventually decides to go, even though it costs, some money for the ticket. He decides to go.
£5.
I know, God. When he's there, they go to a review show, which is the connection with the dubious connection to Soho. They go to a review bar to watch the ladies, and kind of, it's an interesting few scenes where they kind of experience these women on the stage, and there's a dance number, a song, and Diana Dors appears as part of this song, which is really quite the lyrics of the song about dollies for the boys, or whatever, and they're all kind of there on the stage as these dolls that the men are allowed to kind of take home with them. It's really quite shocking, I think, to modern eyes, but he's there. Travel broadens the mind, apparently, Chaley, he's told from one of his friends on the coach, and it certainly does, because he suddenly falls in love with one of the performers, played by Diana Dors, and you would absolutely just fall in love with her. She's gorgeous, and he decides he wants to spend time with her, takes her out for dinner in a hilarious scene in a restaurant. You can imagine the rest of the plot. She finds out he's got a bit of money. He doesn't want to spend any of that money, but she's determined to kind of try and get him to spend it on her. He goes back to Yorkshire and to Ethel. It's that kind of the to and fro in between, he's stuck between these two women, wet Ethel and gorgeous exotic Diana, who eventually comes to the town in a dubious kind of way to kind of open a local centre.
And Chailey's blatantly saying to Ethel, oh, she's so lovely, want to bring her up here, to her face. And she takes it.
Oh, honestly, Ethel, mate, just sort it out. There's a lovely scene later on when Diana Dors' character, Ruthine, does come to the town. There's a great scene in a hotel room where her and Ethel get drunk together. And I love that scene. They talk about the situation and form this unlikely alliance, which kind of saves the day. And everyone gets their man in the end.
When we first see Diana Dors, she's dressed in a wedding dress, and she finishes the film in a wedding dress as well.
She does, yeah, because every woman's dream is to get married. That's all you want in life. Yeah, they both end up with the man of their dreams in the end. Ethel gets her man, and Diana Dors' character Ruthine gets her man as well in a surprising twist.
Yeah, that surprising twist is a bit weird as well. It's a bit like the West End show, because Chailey says, well, I don't want to marry her. You marry her. And he says, all right, I will. And Ruthine just accepts it.
Like she's some sort of plaything that isn't a real person. Yeah, it's absolutely shocking, really.
It's interesting that Batley has taken the film to its heart, as you described, because some of the representations are a bit ropey. But, I suppose that was of its time, wasn't it? The North was always kind of either comical or depressed when compared to sophisticated metropolitan London, where they have lamb chops in French.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. It's a comical portrayal, but it's quite a sympathetic portrayal as well. I love the feeling of town pride, which kind of comes across from the Lord Mayor and the Chailey. He decides to become a town councillor, to be a man of influence. He wants to be someone. Being someone is staying in your town and doing something there. It's not going off and doing something different. You stay and you make something of yourself there, and that kind of feeling that kind of comes across from the film. And yeah, there's these stereotypes, but there's a thing. I think there's a nice. I like this film. I think it's really sweet, and despite its kind of portrayals of Yorkshire, it also highlights some of the good things as well. And I think it's quite a sweet portrayal. But yeah, that feeling of the North being this kind of place that is completely separate, from London, big London, and kind of going to London being a big thing. But that's still the case, for a lot of people. They don't go to London, It's a big thing to do. But yeah, I've got a real soft spot for this film.
So I want to talk about Diana a bit. When I started reading the book, I kind of knew that she had this life that was lived in the tabloids to a certain extent. I remember seeing her on various chat shows talking about her weight loss and weight gain and all that kind of stuff. And she was constantly on the front page of the tabloids. And what stage was she at in her tumultuous private life when this film was made? She was already a star, wasn't she? And was she married by this stage?
She was. So yeah, she was already a star. She started her screen career in 1946 with a small role. She was 15 at the time, which is just amazing. She wasn't playing 15; she was playing slightly older. Her performance in that film, which is The Shop at Sly Corner, was brief but impactful. She lit up the screen from that very first performance. But she was a studio contract artist. In 1955 she I think was still with Rank, and the British film industry at that time, that's what it was. It's this carousel of the same people in the same films, the different studios kind of intermingling and lending out their actors to various productions. So you get the same people. You get John Gregson, you get Diana Dors, even the director of Value for Money, Ken Anakin, he'd worked with Diana several times. I think by the time she made this film, which came out in 1955, she'd made, I think, 25 films by that point. Wow. So if you think she started her career in 46, this is only 55. That's a huge amount of work that she did. She was a real... she really worked really hard. She did a lot of stuff in her early career, a lot of different performances, albeit a lot of them very similar in their nature. These films were, there's a commonality, particularly in the performances that she gives or the characters she plays. She says herself a lot, when you read about her own thoughts on her career. She knew that she was being typecast even early on. Even in 1955, she knew she was typecast as the bad girl or the femme fatale type. And, that continues through the 50s and beyond. She was absolutely at her kind of prime in terms of her studio film output in 1955. And I think in 1955 alone, I think she had 6 films come out. which is pretty significant, for an actor. Kind of the star in those films. And I think she was pretty much kind of top of the bill in most of them. There were others that were kind of supporting cast, but largely she was the star. And she was very popular. She was gaining a lot of attention. You mentioned, obviously, her personal life and the roller coaster that was. She was married at this time to Dennis Hamilton, who she married in 1951 when she was 19. And he had quite a big influence on her career, largely seen as kind of a negative influence on her in her personal life, and the way that he took control of her career and her career direction, and the way that she presented herself outside of her screen role. So the way she dealt with publicity, the press, that side of things, he very much took the lead on that and kind of took it in a direction which she wasn't necessarily comfortable with, but that she wasn't able to kind of stop. And it certainly got her recognition, it certainly got her attention in the press and with the public, but not always for the right reasons. But he was, he branded himself as her Svengali. He wanted to be seen as this guy who was kind of, he took control of her career, I think, in order to kind of present himself in a certain way. He was not a nice man, and it was not a good marriage.
Is he the reason she didn't kind of push back against his bad girl femme fatale thing? I mean, was she not able to say, I don't want to do that role, I want to do something that's slightly more challenging?
To be honest, the opportunities weren't there, for actors like Diana Dors at that time in Britain. I think there are multiple influences in the mix there, because yes, there's him and the way he persuaded her to take certain roles, but actually the other roles weren't really there. For a woman like Diana, as an actor, there weren't really those opportunities in Britain. What she wanted to do, she wanted to go to Hollywood. The next step for her after building her career in Britain was to go to Hollywood. And after Yield to the Night, she had that opportunity to go there and get she got a contract to make a few pictures of that with RKO, I think it was. It didn't work out well.
Largely because of Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, he did not make things easy for her out there.
Could you talk about the incident that made her be seen in a less favourable light by the American public?
So she went to Hollywood. She had the chance to possibly be a contract artist out there. This was her big chance. It's what she wanted. She saw herself as a star. She wanted to be a star. This was what she was kind of working towards, was, going to Hollywood and making a name for herself out there, getting the roles that she felt she wanted, in the bigger pictures, with the glamour that should come along with being a film star, rather than being a film star in Britain, which, was a different prospect. And she went out there, she rented a house in the Hollywood Hills. She took Dennis Hamilton with her, obviously as her husband and her, Svengali. She had a big party at the place they were staying. Everyone was invited. You had all your gossip columnists there and your newspaper people and stars and kind of various people. And halfway through this party, there was an incident where a photographer pushed her and Hamilton and a couple of other people into a swimming pool.
Was this intentionally?
It's hard to say. The reporting of it at the time was a bit mixed. It was a playful accident. I don't know. The photographer, kind of paparazzi photographer, maybe thought he might capture a funny moment, let's say. Dennis Hamilton reacted very badly and he punched the photographer. And obviously that was reported everywhere, all over the papers, all over the press over there. And it really affected Diana's ability to kind of have that kind of positive presence over there as a Hollywood star. She was tainted by Hamilton's violent reaction. He was asked to go home by the studio bosses, and it was never the same again for her. She stayed there and she did do a couple of films, but it just ruined things for her because she was tainted by Hamilton's image.
It wasn't, you say he punched the photographer. I think he punched him quite a lot, didn't he? I read one account where it seems like it was a bit of an onslaught.
Accounts vary of it, but yeah, he was a violent man. He was violent towards Diana as well. There are incidents, that she recalls and tells in her own. She released 2 autobiographies in her time, and yeah, she does recount those incidents of his violent possessive behaviour. This was not something potentially unexpected, I guess, from someone like Hamilton. It was just done in the glare of the public eye in America with everybody present, and it was a real sea change in terms of her career. That Hollywood career came crashing down, essentially. And after a few months, she finished filming and kind of came home, and that was it. She came home to the same types of films she'd been doing previously. She had to revert back to type, and that the dreams of a Hollywood career were in tatters around her.
So when she went to Hollywood, this was after, like you say, it was after Yield to the Night, which is the film that everybody talks about as being her greatest achievement as a film. And I have to agree. I mean, I've seen maybe 7 or 8 Diana Dors films, maybe more, and it's the one that utterly stands out. It's a fantastic film. And it feels like that should have been a springboard to better films, a higher calibre of films than there onwards. It didn't seem to happen. And is this partly the Hollywood incident with Hamilton and partly just Hamilton's influence generally? Because she could act, that was clear from that film. And what do you put it down to, that she didn't then have that stellar career after that film?
Yeah, I think her career, she was plagued by bad decisions and bad fortune a lot of the time. Yield to the Night was an amazing film. It was a controversial film. It was J. Lee Thompson, the director. He wanted to do something which really had an impact, and Diana Dors was absolutely mesmerising in that performance. But really, obviously, to everybody else, it seemed unusual to cast her in that film, but she absolutely just played that part so well. It went to Cannes, it was nominated for prizes in Cannes. She went to the Cannes Film Festival, to promote the film as well. She was should have been riding on the crest of a wave then. She came back and expected the phone to be ringing off the hook, but it didn't. And she went to Hollywood. That didn't work out. And yeah, it should have been the start of something. Her performance in that film alone, should have led to so many great opportunities on the acting front. As you say, she was a great actor. I'm always kind of saying to people, she was a great actor. She was a beautiful woman. She was a star, but she was a great actor, and it should have led to those really interesting roles then. Those roles kind of came later on in her career when she was able to shed the glamorous image a little bit. She was able to take on those interesting, more meaty character roles later in her career, which I think a lot of people don't realise. She continued working all the way through through to the early 80s and gave some really fascinating performances when she was allowed to. And I think there was this image built around her, caused by Hamilton, caused by those poor choices in terms of her career. She was influenced by Hamilton and making those bad. She needed to earn the money. He had nothing. She was the money maker in the relationship, as she was in all of her marriages. She always had to keep working, and she always did. She always kept working, but it wasn't always what she wanted to do. It was only maybe later on in her career when she was able to relax a little bit and do some more interesting stuff. But she died very young. She was 52 when she died. She died in 84. And I do wonder what she could have gone on to do, beyond then as a character actor. She could have done some wonderful stuff. She was already showing, she really had such acting ability and real kind of nuance within those performances later on. She could have gone on to do wonderful things. She should have been given that opportunity early in her career, but actually in Britain, there were no opportunities like that. The Hollywood thing didn't work out. So what were her choices? As an actor in Britain in the 50s and 60s, there really wasn't much to choose from. So she made the best of a bad lot, really, I think.
The trip to Cannes for Yield to the Night, is this when she turned up in a mink bikini, or was this a different...
No, that was Venice. That was the Venice Film Festival. It was around the same period. Okay. It was, again, the mink bikini thing is a great demonstration of the Hamilton effect, I think, on her career. Although she claims that the mink bikini was her idea, not his. But yeah, she turned up in this mink bikini. All eyes were upon her. Obviously, it was things like tricks like that her and Hamilton, or Hamilton's influence, kept her doing. Keep her in the public eye. She was a brand. She became a brand and a commodity, which is very unusual in those times. She was the first person to do that. To kind of brand herself and kind of promote herself in a certain way, using the press in a way. Yeah, it was very unusual at the time. It was the first kind of example of doing that. She used the press when she needed the money. She notoriously was the first person to sell a story to the Sunday tabloids. Her life story was serialised in the news of the world over several Sundays and scandalised society and the country, and was talked about in Parliament and all sorts. She had an interesting relationship, I think, with herself as a brand, knowing that she needed to do something to keep herself in the public eye, but actually also wanted to have a good, meaty, successful acting career. It's a theme that always comes up within her story, is that kind of battle between the two forces, wanting to be a good actor, wanting to have those opportunities, but equally needing to make money and keep going.
And supporting these dissolute husbands who were losers.
Yeah, even a second husband wasn't, much better. He was different. He wasn't Dennis Hamilton. Richard Dawson was her second husband, but he was a drain on her differently, I guess. She found love with a deep love and affection with her third husband, Alan Lake, later in life. But even then there were problems. He had his own personal issues, and again, she was carrying these relationships. She was the one earning, she was the one out there. This keeps reoccurring as a theme. She's the one who has to keep going, and if that means taking tours to working men's clubs or doing cabaret instead of an interesting play or an interesting screen role, then that's what she did.
Thank you, Anna, for coming on the show. And I should warn you that when I was searching for Anna's book on Amazon, Jeff Bezos personally intervened and kept changing my search term from Anna Kale to Anna Cake. Don't let Jeff have his fun. Just go to the show notes to find a link from where you can purchase The Real Diana Dors by Anna Kale, bypassing that pesky Bezos. And thanks again to Nigel Hamilton-Walker for talking about his pal Kim. The sex manual we talked about that Kim wrote under the pseudonym of Terence Hendrickson was called Variations on a Sexual Theme. And at the time of recording, there is at least one second-hand copy available to buy online. You can find links to that, to Nigel's book, to Anna's book, to various bits and pieces about the guests, the film, and of course about Diana Dors and Dandy Kim at the usual place, sohobitespodcast.com. If you've enjoyed the programme, I'd be very grateful if you could leave a nice review. It's very straightforward. You just have to go to ratethispodcast.com/sohobites. There's no prize this time, I'm afraid, but just do it out of the goodness of your heart. And please feel free to get in touch with the show with your comments and suggestions via Twitter. We're on @BitesSoho or by email on sohobitespodcast@gmail.com. Soho Bites is produced by me, Dom DeLargy, and is based on an original idea by Dr. Jing and Young. That's all from me. Until next time, TTFN.